Hey, it's Anthony and Tucker with Land Title. We came to bring you your lender market update. So let's dive right into what you need to know the most.
So what happened in July? Well, I'm sure you guys felt it. We had less under contracts, right? So month over month, we dropped about 8.5% from June into July for under contracts. Our solds were also down a little bit in July as well, where our active also came down as well, kind of tightening that inventory for your buyers to shop with. Looking at it year to date, though, something to just remind everyone, we still are up in our sales. We're up 3% in the number of units sold year to date so far. So I think that's something to kind of remember. And we're about even for our under contracts, where our active inventory year to date has been a lot less. We're about a little over 11% down in our active. So that's really kind of keeping the prices stable that we're going to show a little bit later on.
The attached side of the market has been doing something very different. It has a super elevated level of inventory. It's been there for basically 3 straight years now. The active units are floating around exactly where they were. The under contracts have diminished 11% month over month, but down 20% year over year. There's just not as many buyers out there purchasing these properties. Now, we show a 2.5% year over year sales price increase. It's largely due to some really cool luxury stuff that sold and just some higher end stuff that hadn't been selling that kind of came off the market in July.
So looking at our active inventory, where your buyers shopping right now, it's pretty evenly split amongst our bigger communities, right? At just under 1,000 units, at 937 units on the market. City of Boulder is holding the majority of those at 361, so about a third of them, a little over a third, whereas Longmont is just under a third, and then Erie's about a sixth of that amount. And that's where we can really see is our inventory is not equal across the market. Our Louisville, Superior, and Lafayette are either flat or down month over month in inventory, whereas Erie has actually grown in inventory, really, giving more options, especially for those buyers a little bit more, pinched by the price of getting into a house. Boulder's roughly flat month over month, while Longmont's down in our inventory. So that's just kind of taking a few more options off the table for your clients. That's what's kind of kept our detached market so stable this year is, just less inventory overall. It's kind of keeping that from having that surge like we did last year where we had that really high inventory and then prices started to recorrect. We're just not seeing that in detached where there's a lot of concessions still, but we're just not seeing massive changes.
In the attached market, we have 3 years of elevated levels of inventory and 3 years of major price declines because of that. Now, it's mostly happening in the city of Boulder, right? The aging condo townhouse projects that we have here, there's just so much of that where year over year we're down 4% in active units, but it just isn't enough to really grasp the change. So you can see in some of the markets, though, Erie and Superior, we do have more inventory on the market, which is a good sign for buyers. Those have been a lot more, less inventory available. So at least there's something to go shopping for.
Now, looking at our month supply of inventory, really it's just that relationship, that ratio between buyer and seller. County is sitting at 3.4 month supply of inventory, whereas when we look into the submarkets, Niwot's a lot higher, right? Much more expensive. A lot more listings than there are buyers. It's just a luxury market. So let's really look at Boulder for where we're talking about. Boulder's sitting at, about 1.5 almost percent higher than the county. 1.5 months higher than the county for the month supply of inventory. And that's really just saying, hey, it's more buyer favored, right? Once we hit that 4-month supply and over, that's really starting to lean towards the buyer. Whereas for the rest of the county, when we're looking at Erie and Longmont, those are much more balanced, right? That's going to be a lot more of a neutral footing for both sides, your buyer and the seller. Whereas when we get into Lafayette, Louisville, and Superior, your buyer's not going to be able to ask for nearly as much. You may not be able to get as many concessions, so I'd be careful on the pricing and how you're looking at their loan because they're going to be in a lot more competitive situation than they would be in the other parts of the county. So just keep that in mind. Louisville, Lafayette, Superior, it's going to be a little bit more competitive for your buyers, so their offers probably have to be a little bit stronger.
And if you go over to attached and you have people that really just want a deal, well, this is where they can get it, right? Outside of Lafayette, where
if they only get financing and because new financing rules. Thanks you.
Yeah, lots of financing changes there. So these are tough, right? And clearly that's why there's more inventory. That's why there's less buyers participating because it's way more constricted than it was before. And with all those rules, I expect this to continue to get worse for a little while longer. So that being said, I mean, we're 6 months of inventory or so across most of these markets. Lafayette, luckily, there's there's a lot of newer townhouses out there that are, buttoned up, easy to sell. So as you're working with buyers, clearly you got to know those submarkets. But we make jokes about it, but it is a lot tougher out there in the attached market.
It is. Looking at our active and sold by price range, this is for our detached market. What we're really seeing is some nice strength in the market. Now, yes, we are down month over month in a few of our sold price bands, but where we're seeing a lot of strength month over month and, really even year over year is that under 600,000, we had a lot of strength there, that 3 to 600,000, a lot of growth there, a lot of strength there. Where we've had a little bit of a drop month over month, at least, was that 6 to a million. We've kind of had a decrease in our sales there, but that's not always the worst thing because our year to date is actually doing pretty well. So just a little bit of changes in there. Then when we look into our a little bit more expensive, our million to let's say about 1.5 million, a lot of that inventory is going to be in Boulder. That's kind of our entry level in Boulder. Crazy to say. We're down a little bit there, but our year over year is doing really good. And then we're also year to date pretty much flat. Now where there's a lot of change is that 1.5 to 2 million and then that 2 to even 2.5 million. We are down month over month, but year to date, we've had a really good year so far compared to last year. We're up about 20% in that 1.5 to 2 million and about 40% in that 2 to 2.5 million. And we've also seen some really good high-end sales, as we can see here, 12 sold in the 3+ million, 3 for that 2.5 to 3 million, then 16 in that 2 to 2.5 million. So there are good luxury sales still happening. Keep those arms out there. I think those are going to be really useful tools going forward for those jumbo loans.
Absolutely. In the attached market, clearly some stuff is going on well in the luxury market. So I think you got some opportunity there. We had 5 over $1 million that sold last month. That was a really good sign. There's a lot on the market though. So yes, we're getting some decent people coming in the last couple of months buy-in, which is great news. The other thing is, look at the opportunity if you've got financing for some of that non-warrantable stuff, because under 300,000, we really are seeing some of that start to turn because it's becoming a lot better of a deal. And it may not be warrantable, but a lot of times they might cash flow right now or getting at least close to cash flowing. Tucker and I have been keeping an eye on them. But, it really, with all the depreciation that the attached markets are seeing, we really are starting to get to a better buy, right? Yeah. So you can see that across the market, but these are all really small numbers. And this is basically one of the biggest months of sales of the year. And we're showing, 27 in the biggest.
And what does this mean to you and your buyers? Lot of opportunity in attached.
Absolutely.
Depending if it's the right HOA, the right community, things are updated, no more special assessments. There can be some great opportunity to get into the right location at a reasonable price.
Agreed. For the first time in a while. So it's
Absolutely.
been good to see.
Looking at our month supply of inventory days on market, really I want to focus on our month supply of inventory. You can just see how, as your buyer goes up in their price band of what they're purchasing, it becomes more and more in their favor in the negotiations. So the higher end buyer you have, the more room in negotiations they're going to have, the more room you have to ask for your concessions, buy downs, all those great tools. When we look at our days on market, we want to be very clear when it's this scatter plotted, what it really shows me is it's not that much of days on market is important. It's the individual property in each listing. So if your buyer finds a house they like that's buttoned up in that median price band, there's going to be competition. So you can't sit back and wait a couple days. They may not have the time to think about it, wait a week, go see it again. They will probably have to move quite a bit faster, especially in those lower median price bands on a buttoned up product.
Yeah, absolutely. If we look at it from the month supply of inventory and on the attached side, you really start at 4.5 months of inventory. They've got a lot to choose from. If you've got buyers who are more worried about the deal than they are about, the perfect house, right? Then this might be a really good opportunity for them. You can see in the luxury side of things or the higher end of things, the ones that sold were clearly buttoned up, ready to go. So if you've got that part of the market and you're doing a loan on a $800,000 townhouse or something, you really have to be on it, right? And they do need to make offers quick. But you can see most of these are taking 55 days to get under contract. So it's tough out there.
Yep. Looking at our average sold price, we're down a bit. June was a high mark. We had some really high-end luxury sale. So we're down a little bit month over month, about 5%. But I really want to look at our trailing 12 months, which is that TTM change percent on the bottom of the graph. And why I like looking at that is it's showing where are we heading in a trend. What trend are we going? And what we can see is just how stable Boulder County is. outside of Boulder having a drop, and that's because we've had less sales over the last 12 months in the luxury market, which really skews us up. When we have one $12 million unit sell, hey, that is how many normal, median houses sell. Okay, that's 8 of them. So it really skews the numbers. Whereas Longmont's a little bit more on the flat side, but across the board, it just shows how strong Boulder County is.
And I think that's good positive numbers there.
There's some really good positive numbers. Now, Louisville, bit of that 5, almost 6% increase is going to be the new builds, different product, replacing older product, things like that. But it's a really good sign. Same with Superior. They've had some new product out there. They're also in a really good market. So we're just seeing prices are very stable. So with your buyers out there who are nervous about prices dropping in detached, this is one thing you can always kind of bank on is Boulder County is stable. It's safe. It's not going to have the massive swings like a lot of other markets do, even within the front range. So I think that's a really good sign for your buyers who are on the fence. Boulder County is stable.
Absolutely. The attached market is very different, as we've seen over the last 4 years. The last 3 years specifically, we've seen some pretty big price declining, and it actually is led by Boulder, right? And because there's so many units, right, those 300 units on the market with less buyers, it's dropped a little bit faster. So over the last 12 months, we've seen about a 6% decline in price there. Some of these markets, though, really hasn't been that bad, right? I mean, Lafayette hasn't looked great, but it's down 2.7%. That's not awful. It's like, don't panic that think the floor is going to fall out from underneath you if you buy a duplex in Longmont, right? Minus 1.3% is a drop in the bucket compared to some of what people are seeing or thinking they're seeing out there. And Erie has done absolutely the best at 0.5% drop, and it's been almost flat across this entire time.
And a lot of it's probably the product, even within attached. Our 40, 50-year-old condo in Boulder is going to be a lot different than your 15, 20-year-old townhouse in Lafayette, Louisville.
Absolutely. Well, this is a look at some sold units. So this one I think is important because you can see just kind of the basic trend of where we are versus last year. It's easy to read. If you need to share something with clients, I always think this is helpful. The year-to-date change is at the bottom. So if you want to show some of the submarkets, have they done better or worse? Longmont really has done well, 7.5% increase. And Boulder as well, 3% more sales than last year.
Yeah. Now looking at the attached side, May was terrible, right? So we're probably not going to make up for it throughout the year by number of units sold. But it was really good to see that we did outpace July last year, and we're still at least holding somewhat steady. While we are year to date down just under 5%, it's still somewhat steady. We're not seeing double-digit drops. So trying to find some positives in it is what it is.
All right, so last slides for you today are percentage list to sale price. This is the detached single family one. We're showing 98.6%. This doesn't take into account concessions, and it doesn't take into account price drops. So remember, as you're kind of factoring in, how do we make offers, right? How aggressive can we be with our offers with our buyers? This can help a little bit, but just understand that a lot of times they don't move until people either get the price drop into effect, and they really want to see it come close to that full asking price. Well, good news is you can get concessions on top of that in many ways. And this is really balanced compared to where it was a year ago.
And then just go back real quick on that. When you're talking with your agent and your buyers and they have a house they love, but it's still overpriced, write an offer. Try to talk to that buyer's agent. Write an offer so that they don't have to sit on the market another 3 months, do 2 more price drops to get to the number that's, what your client thinks is the buyer's number. So it's just something to think about in there. And then with that appraisal coming back, you already look like a genius. Yeah. The attached side, a little different here. We're sitting at 97%, but there's also not a lot of units selling. And that's not including the ton of price drops we're seeing across the market for attached units, especially the condos here in the Boulder market. And so what this is telling me is, yes, once the price gets the right thing, we're seeing offers come in there. And so once again, if something's overpriced, talk to the buyer's agent. If your client likes it, write an offer. And they're probably not getting barely any showings or anything else. So there's room to negotiate, right? You can really push on the attached market with your clients and really ask for, hey, your rate buy downs and closing costs covered. You can ask for a lot more on the attached market just because there's not a lot of buyers. So there's a good opportunity, great value for your value buyers.
There really is. Well, thanks for joining us today. Sorry we're a little long-winded, but honestly, we just appreciate you spending time with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you, everybody. We look forward to seeing you this fall.